And remember, that is the state that you are in when you walk along here and watch sense perceptions, listen, see all the different sense perceptions. And you don't interpret, you relinquish interpretation. Yet you know what you're looking at, and yet you don't know what you're looking at. It is not, no labels arise anymore, or if they do, they are recognized as mere labels, and then they subside, and there's again a space of not knowing. All the label is the illusion of knowing. Please.
It's very nice to see you. I heard about you many years ago, about 6 years ago. And it's very nice to be in your presence. And you are this. A number of years ago in Bihar, there was a prince, 2,546 years ago. And in his awakening, he knew how the whole of manifestation was. And he said, Mara, I have seen how you build this house of samsara. I have broken your rich pole. Never will you build this house again. In the words of the great sage Ramana Maharishi, he said there is a final truth. Nothing has ever existed. Nothing does exist, nothing will ever exist. This is the ultimate fact. In awakening, there is an inherent wisdom that is beyond mind, as we say. There is a knowingness that is beingness, that is beyond doubt, beyond any deceit. All these great masters say the same thing. This is all illusion. It does not exist now, and it never did exist, and it will never exist. Is this your experience?
Yes. I'm not telling you that in those words, because they only become true for you as you realize that for yourself. If I told you that, half of you would go home. This is it? I only tell you what works as a pointer into that state. Certain realizations come out of that state by themselves that are deeply true, but do not work as pointers into that state so well. So there are some sages have uttered those words, and for a few isolated individuals they may work as pointers, and perhaps they were talking to certain people who they realized could see the truth of those words, so they worked as pointers. But for most in the teaching that comes through this form, certain pointers are used and others are not used. There may be very deep truths that you will realize only through that inner knowing, and then it becomes true for you. So, yes, this is the truth, but I've never said it like that. And I may not say it again unless you ask me directly, in which case I would say yes. That's right. Now, it may well be that one day I may find myself with one person, and those words will come out of my mouth, because there's never any prior intention before a word comes out of my mouth. And then that will work as perhaps the final pointer for that being. And those words suddenly will be true. Otherwise, if I said it, those words can easily be used by the mind and become a concept. And so, this is why the Buddha also said certain things and refrained from saying other things, because he realized how easily words are grasped by the mind and made into conceptual knowledge. So that is the beauty of teachings. They come in slightly different forms, and some statements you may find in some teachings and not in others. Buddha, as we all know, didn't speak of God wisely, because that is the greatest concept that the mind can grasp at and add to itself and create images out of and identify with. And of course it's been misunderstood, because Western intellectuals started studying Buddhism, professors at universities, and immediately, because they only saw those pointers, and they completely misunderstood and said this is an atheistic religion and it is totally nihilistic, it is life-denying, they said. So they wrote PhDs about Buddhism. You could become a professor on Buddhism without knowing anything really about Buddhism. So that's how easily the mind can misinterpret. So, this is the truth. Whether in this form it will come out of my mouth again, I don't know. How to deal with the unconscious of your own people, especially your own children. That is hard for many people to accept, that your children need to make mistakes, do what they do, create suffering for themselves, and you can watch it, how they're doing it. In front of your eyes, they're creating suffering for themselves, making mistakes, as you call it. And then you want to save them from the suffering. You want to save them from making mistakes. In other words, you want to stop them from evolving and learning. You want to stop them from suffering. And no human being can go through this life without it's an essential part of being human, and then going beyond. So to realize, if you had your way, you would create, if you were omnipotent, of course, you would create an ideal situation for your children, an ideal environment, everything right. They're good at school, they do well there, isn't that great? And they go on to university and they're brilliant minds, and then they meet this beautiful partner and they have beautiful children and a nice house, and everything is working so well, beautiful, they're making no mistakes, they're not suffering. What would the end result be? It would be a very superficial family, to say the least, that arises. They would be happy doing their shopping. No suffering has ever crossed their path. They haven't made any mistakes. And yet it's every human being's destiny to make mistakes. There are no mistakes. Only from a limited perspective there are mistakes. You never made a mistake in your life. You're here. Whatever you ever did, what you hear. Where you hear the message of liberation. So there are no mistakes, only if you adopt a particular perspective. Then it's called a mistake. It's limited. It's a fragment of the truth. It's a thought. So of course you would want to spare them their suffering, this self-inflicted suffering. And some suffer more deeply than others. I've had parents come to me with extremely tragic stories of what their children did to themselves or others. Dreadful. To the point of saying no human being, no parent could live with that. And yet, they do. And there's the learning. And if your child creates suffering for others and ends up in prison, there's the learning. So it's the acceptance of that. Allow them to make mistakes. Allow them to be unconscious. Allow them to create their own suffering. But you can be there, not being drawn into it, making it, giving more fuel to that. Allow it. Some children are addicted to drugs. It can be very hard for a parent to have a child. And great suffering can be there until finally, and you've tried it all, you've tried everything. Many times, and it happened again and again. And finally, surrender. And then great love is there. But you allow that movement of unconsciousness. You've done everything on the external level. And then finally you surrender and you allow them to be unconscious. You still help, but there's an inner allowing. So if people close to you are creating great suffering for themselves, are in states of great resistance, inner resistance, it may be that they cannot surrender. Even the word surrender or acceptance, when you say that, you say, what? Are you mad? You're insane. Acceptance. They don't hear. It doesn't go in. And so, in those cases, you surrender for them, so to speak. It could also be to do with a parent. It's not always children. Often it's the parents who are in great suffering. And so, what do? Your mother, your father, you surrender for them. You don't demand anymore that they should be more conscious. You don't demand anymore that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. You don't demand anymore that they should understand you. You surrender. And then you visit them for Christmas or Thanksgiving. And for the first time, it's not a source of great conflict having to be there for a whole day or 2 or 3 days. Oh my God, not another Christmas with a family. In the surrendered state, no demands are made. Your father, your mother, they display whatever behavior they display and have been displaying for 50, 60, 70 years. Maybe they have the same conversations they had 50 years ago, 20 years ago. It's fine, it's the human mind, nothing personal. And you are simply there as a surrendered entity. So this is already the beginning of, to come back to your question, which I don't talk about usually, this is already the beginning of the end of the world. Because when you identify with form, all the forms are extremely heavy. There's the heaviness, the solidity of the world of form. And as you surrender, the world of form loses its seeming solidity. It's not solid at all, but it feels and looks very solid. And it loses, and that, I'm telling you that because that is already something that you can know for yourself, how all the structures lose their heaviness, including the human beings. So the forms become less substantial. And that includes the form of my father, my mother, my child, which before was heavy in its egoic density, very much there. And then in surrender, something happens. It's lighter. That's the beginning of the end of illusion. That's as far as I go. So it's allowing even people close to you, allow them to be who they are in their present. It's not who they are, but to manifest whatever they manifest. And often the change will happen then. Suddenly. How did that happen? I didn't demand anymore that he or she should understand me, and suddenly at Christmas dinner he asks me, "So tell me a little bit about these strange retreats that you go to." And he always said before that, "Why are you involved in these weird cults? You should go into business for yourself, do something real, do something with your life." He's been repeating that for 20 years. And you felt angry about that. Why doesn't he? He understands nothing about me. And then surrender happened. And suddenly, oh. Or not. Doesn't matter. I have given up many addictions in my life, and the last addiction, it seems, is the addiction to food. Last night, I sat with the craving I felt, the energy in my body, without attaching a story to it. What happened was I experienced an incredible amount of fear as I glimpsed the power of being free. Please talk more about this. Yes, fear can arise, and that is the egoic fear, fears its own death. And it's not real. And what do you do with fear? As you enter the surrendered state, you may encounter the region of fear, because the ego fears surrender because it knows it to be its own end. So as you surrender to a certain condition, inner or outer, and then suddenly there's a pulling back. Don't go there, don't go there. And then you do surrender again. And then you don't allow the fear to push you out, but you can then allow the fear also to be, and it won't kill you. And so that also, so then you've dropped into that. And when you accept it completely, the very fear turns into aliveness. And you drop down. So whatever arises, there's that. There are many addictions, yes. It's an external manifestation of the mind needing to add something to me. Now it does that on a psychological level a lot, but that's not enough for the mind. It'll use the body to add to the incomplete sense of self. It's the unconscious impulse behind addiction, and you can see addiction operates in the tiniest things that are not recognized as addiction. You can't stop eating the potato chips. And if you watch the movement, they don't do much. And it goes... It's an adding. You're not a lot of nutritional value, or it could be other kinds of junk food. Is the smoking. So food is a big one for many people. You don't only reincarnate into thought streams, you can reincarnate into food. And for a moment it seems to work. You feel a little bit more complete after eating a box of chocolates. I spoke to one person who has a big problem with weight, and he said the mind, he began to observe his own mind, and he came up with one thought the main thought that would justify his going to the fridge and eating was, "You've had a rough time, you deserve a break." And of course, every day he was having a rough time. And then he observed that mind movement. Oh. And next time it came, he allowed that mind movement to be there, and he just sat there with it, without moving to the fridge. Because he recognized that. Kindly throw light on the following 2 points. 1. Why one form loves the other form even when the other form does not love the first form. I know what you mean. We know what you mean. Why is love not reciprocated? Why does one-way love traffic situation arise? I am placing my aching heart before you. Please operate. Thank you. All right, I will begin the operation. Now, one form loves and the other form doesn't reciprocate. Why is that? And the pain that comes with that, great pain for many people, it's enormous pain. Now, you know that the basic condition of the self, or the egoic self, is one of a very deep-seated sense of lack, of not enough, of not complete. And then it tries to fill through strategies. The mind itself tries to fill that lack that it knows and feels almost continuously, except for brief moments when something has been put in there, and then for a moment the lack is not felt. It never lasts long. So it looks for the next thing, and it looks to the future, it looks to add to me, to fill that hole that is always there, where I'm not myself, I'm not complete, I'm not home, I haven't arrived. And so all kinds of strategies are there. And one of the main areas where it looks to fulfill that lack is in the area of relationship, the other person, he or she. And then, when that happens, the entire focus of the self becomes focused on one other person who is perceived unconsciously as the one who is going to complete me, make me whole. He or she is the one. And so almost an obsessive attachment forms to that image, that form of that person. And that is called falling in love. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the other person feels the same about you, that you are going to complete him or her also. And that is great. You both feel that you are going to complete each other. And then probably you will want to get married, sign a contract, just to make sure that for the rest of your life you are going to complete me and you're not going to leave me, because that would have dire consequences if you broke that contract and left me. Don't you even think about that?